When my son said marriage changed everything between us, I did not answer him right away. I just looked at his face and smiled. Not because I agreed, but because I did not want him to see my heart breaking in that moment. It was a quiet evening. The house was clean. Dinner was already cold on the table. Outside, sky was turning dark.
Okay.
And a soft wind moved the curtains. Near the window, he stood near the door. His keys were in his hand. He did not sit down. He did not look at me for long. He said it very calmly, like he was talking about the weather. "Amy, things are different now. After marriage, everything changes." I nodded slowly. Inside, something heavy fell in my chest. I wanted to ask him one simple question. When did I stop being your home? But I stayed quiet, because mothers learn early that silence is sometimes safer than truth. That night after he left, I sat alone at the dining table. I touched his empty chair. I remembered how once he could not eat without me sitting beside him. "Marriage changed everything," he said. But in that moment, I realized something else. I was the one who had been slowly disappearing from his life, long before that day. This is my story, not full of anger, not full of blame, just a quiet telling of how love can fade without. I was not always a lonely woman sitting at a quiet table once. This house was full of noise, laughter, footsteps, running from one room to another. I married young, like many women of my time. I did not choose my husband, but I learned to choose love. He was a simple man, hard-working, not very expressive with words, but he cared in his own silent way. We were not rich, but we were never hungry. Our happiness came from small things. Tea in the evening, meals eaten together on the floor. When my son was born, my world became smaller and brighter at the same time. Smaller because everything started to revolve around him. Brighter because his smile gave meaning to my tired days. I still remember holding him for the first time. He was so tiny, his fingers wrapped around mine, as if he was afraid I might leave. From that day, I promised myself one thing. No matter how hard life became, he would never feel alone as he grew older. He became my shadow. He followed me everywhere, to the kitchen, to the neighbor's house, even to the small shop at the corner of the street. At night, he would refuse to sleep unless I was beside him. If I moved away, he would wake up crying, so I stayed. People used to say, "You are raising him too close to your heart." I smiled and said nothing. I did not know then that closeness could later turn into distance. Mother's Caesarea Phyce. When my husband passed away, life changed again. My son was still young, too young to understand loss. I became both mother and father. I learned how to be strong without showing fear. I learned how to hide tears until night. There were days I skipped meals so he could eat well. There were nights I stitched clothes under dim light so his school uniform was cool to be ready in the morning. He never knew these things, and I never wanted him to know. All I wanted was to see him grow into a good man, kind, respectful, grounded. When he got his first job, I cried that night too, but those were proud tears. I felt like my hard days had finally paid off. He started coming home late, talking more about work than about school or friends. That was normal. I told myself, children grow. Parents learn to step back. I thought I was ready. I was wrong. The talk of Mayor Ariadne, the first time he mentioned marriage, I felt a strange mix of joy and fear. Joy, because every mother dreams of seeing her child settle. Fear, because deep inside, I sensed a door was about to close. "She is a good girl," he said. "I like her." I nodded and smiled. I asked polite questions. Her family. Her education. But later that night, alone in my room, I whispered a prayer. "Please, let my son not forget me." I never said this to anyone, because a mother is not supposed to be afraid of her child's happiness. The wedding was simple but beautiful. Guests filled the house again. Music played. Lights shone. People congratulated me. "You must be so happy." They said I was truly. but happiness has many layers. And under mine, there was quiet worry. The early days after May Marariji in the beginning, I tried my best to adjust. I welcomed my daughter-in-law with open arms. I showed her the kitchen, the cupboards, the routines of the house. She was polite, soft, spoken, but distant. I told myself she just needed time. New home always feels strange. My son changed in small ways, so small that others would not notice. But a mother always notices. He stopped sitting with me. After dinner, he stopped sharing his worries. His phone became more important than our evening talks. Once I asked him, "Are you eating well?" He replied quickly, "Yes, Emmy, don't worry." And that was all. No smile, no follow-up question asking if I had eaten. I told myself again, marriage needs space. Do not interfere. So I stayed quiet. Slow diastiancides turned into weeks. Weeks into months. I began eating alone more often. I began waiting longer for his footsteps at night. Sometimes I would hear him laughing in his room, laughing the way he used to laugh with me. I felt happy and sad at the same time. Happy that he was content. Sad that I was no longer part of that happiness. One evening, tried to sit with them. I asked simple questions. "How was your day?" My daughter-in-law smiled politely. My son answered shortly. There was an invisible wall. I could feel it even if I could not see it. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I realized something painful. Love does not disappear. Suddenly, it fades quietly, like light leaving a room at sunset. The changes did not come loudly. They came like dust settling on furniture, so slowly that I did not notice them at first. My mornings became quieter before. My son used to greet me before leaving for work. Now, some days I only heard the door close. I told myself he was busy, new responsibilities, a new life. But every time the door closed without a word, something inside me felt smaller. I started waking up earlier, not because I had more work, but because sleep did not come easily anymore in the kitchen. I moved quietly. I did not want to disturb anyone. I did not want to be a burden in my own home. Sometimes I stood near the stove and wondered how a house could feel full. It's so empty. The kitchen nitrogen monoxide longer felt Mayanida. Kitchen had always been my place, where I knew every sound, every smell. After marriage, I slowly stepped back. I let my daughter-in-law cook. I praised her food even when it was too salty or too plain. One morning, I reached for the spice box. She looked at me and said softly, "Ammy, I will handle it." Her words were polite, but her tone closed a door. I smiled and stepped away. I washed dishes instead. From that day, I asked before touching anything. This small habit made me feel like a guest. I never complained, because I remembered my own early days as a daughter-in-law. I knew how it feels to protect your space still. It's hurt. Small words, big feelings. One afternoon, my son came home early. I felt happy. I thought maybe we would talk. I made tea. I carried his cup with care. It's a way I always. Hattie looked at the clock and said, "I already had tea." I stood there for a second, then I nodded. The tea grew cold in my hands. It was such a small thing, but small things carry big feelings. That night I could not sleep. I kept thinking about how once he waited for my tea like it was a gift. Now it was just another cup, unsaid, less slowly. I began learning new rules. Rules no one explained to me. Do not ask too many questions. Do not give advice unless asked. Do not sit too long in their room once. I reminded my son to take his medicine. He replied, calmly but firmly, "Ami, she reminds me." I felt embarrassed, like a child being corrected. From that day, I kept my reminders to myself. I started measuring my words, my movements, even my smiles. I was careful not to cross lines I did not know existed. The dining table became a place of silence. We sat together, but our hearts were far apart. I noticed they spoke less in front of me. Their conversations paused when I entered the room. I wondered if I made them uncomfortable, if my presence felt heavy. One evening, I served dinner and sat down quietly. My son finished eating quickly and stood up. "We are going out," he said. I looked at the food still on my plate, then at their empty chairs. The house became silent again. That silence stayed long after they left. Mother's guilty started blaming myself. Maybe I held him too close. Maybe I loved him too much. I replayed old memories in my head. Every time I stopped him from going out late. Every time. I worried too much. I wondered if this distance was my punishment. At night, I whispered apologies to the darkness, not knowing exactly what I was sorry for. I prayed for strength, not to control, but to accept the first sharp moment one day. Without planning, the words slipped out. I asked him, "Have I done something wrong?" He looked surprised, then uncomfortable. "No, Amy," he said. "Please don't think like that." But he did not sit down. He did not ask why. I felt this way. He went back to his room. That moment hurt more than harsh words would have, because it showed me how little time he had for my feelings now. Watching from a distance, began watching my son from far away. Like someone watching life through a window. I noticed how he listened carefully to his wife, how he laughed easily with her. I felt happy for him, I truly did, but I also felt invisible once. I heard them planning a trip, a small vacation. No one mentioned it to me. No one asked how I would manage alone. I learned about it when the bags were packed, the empty HOS when they left. The house felt colder. I sat in the living room and listened to the ticking clock. I walked from room to room, touched the curtains, straightened pillows. I realized I was filling time, not living it. That night, I ate alone again. I left the lights on, just to feel less alone. I slept with the television on. The voices helped me forget my own thoughts. Quiet ariso, and something had changed. Deeply, not suddenly, but clearly. I was no longer the center of my son's world, and maybe I was never meant to be forever. I knew this in my mind, but my heart was still learning. I did not hate my daughter-in-law. I did not blame my son. I only felt a soft, constant sadness, like carrying a stone inside my chest. End of part 2, gentle pause. I still believed things could get better. I still believed love would find its way back. But life had its own plans, and the turning point was closer than I imagined. Fade out, rain against a window. Soft piano continues. The day everything changed did not begin with shouting. It began like any other day. I woke up early. I prayed. I made breakfast. The house was quiet, too quiet. I noticed my son and his wife whispering in the living room. Their voices stopped when I entered. I smiled and asked gently, "Is everything okay?" "Yes," my son replied quickly, but he did not meet my eyes. That was the first sign. A small one, but clear. The unexpected CON virus wine later that afternoon. My son came to me alone. He sat down across from me. My heart started beating fast. A mother knows when something serious is coming. He cleared his throat. "Amy," he said, "we need to talk." I nodded. I folded my hands in my lap. He took a deep breath. "There have been some misunderstandings." I listened quietly. I always listened. Words that hurt softly high. Spoke carefully, like someone choosing safe words. "She feels uncomfortable sometimes," he said. "She needs space." I nodded again. I did not interrupt. Then he said the words that stayed with me forever. After marriage, everything changes. Our priorities change. I looked at him, at the boy I raised. The man sitting in front of me felt like a stranger. I asked softly, "Does that mean I am now a problem?" He looked shocked. "No, Amy, not a problem. Just things are different. Different." That word felt heavier than anger. The us there was a pause, a long one. Then he spoke again. We were thinking. Maybe it would be better if you stayed with your sister for some time. For some time. That is what he said. I felt. The room spinning slowly. I held on to the edge of the chair. I smiled. I do not know how, but I did. If that makes things easier, I said, I can go. Inside, something broke quietly. A mother's Celian eye looked relieved. That hurt more than the request itself. He thanked me for understanding. He said it was temporary. I nodded again that day. Nodding became my language. I did not cry, not then, after. He left the room. I sat still for a long time. The walls felt unfamiliar, like they no longer belonged to me. Packing a little nice feather evening. I opened my cupboard. I touched my clothes slowly. I realized how little space my life now took. A few suits, some scarves, old photographs. I packed quietly. I did not want anyone to feel uncomfortable. Every item carried a memory. My hands trembled, but my face stayed calm. No one came to ask if I needed help. The last NIGHT that night? I slept on my bed for the last time. I looked at the ceiling. I remembered rocking my son to sleep in this same house. I remembered reading his school letters. I whispered a prayer for him, for his happiness. I did not ask for mine. The GODBY in thee. Morning, I stood near the door, my small bag at my feet. My son came out. He looked tired, Amy. He said, "This is not permanent." I smiled again. I know. His wife stood behind him. She said nothing. I walked out slowly. The door closed behind me. That sound stayed in my ears for a long time. The journey AWY in the car. I looked out the window. The streets passed by. I felt like I was leaving more than a house. I was leaving a life. I wondered when my home stopped being mine and when I stopped belonging first. Night AWA, my sister, welcomed me warmly. She hugged me tightly. But even in her kindness, I felt lost that night. Lay awake in a new bed, listening to unfamiliar sounds. I stared at the darkness and finally cried. Not loudly, just quietly. The truth sinks ion that night. I understood something painful. Marriage did change everything. Not because love ended, but because roles changed. I was no longer needed the way I once was, and that truth hurt more than rejection. End of part 3. Emotional pause. I thought leaving would make things easier. For them, for me. But distance has its own pain. And my healing had only just begun. Asterisk fade out. Soft rain. Slow piano. The first few days at my sister's house passed slowly, too slowly. I woke up not knowing what to do with myself. There was no routine waiting for me. No one asking for tea or breakfast. I felt useless. Like an old chair pushed into a corner. My sister tried her best to keep me busy. She spoke kindly. She listened. But some pain can only be carried alone. The quiet act chores during the day. When everyone was out, the house became silent. I sat near the window and watched. People pass. Children going to school. Women carrying shopping bags. Life moving forward. I realized something then. Life does not stop when you are hurting. That thought hurt. And helped. Looking back without blame spent many afternoons thinking about my son, about his childhood, about my own mistakes. I asked myself hard questions. Did I depend on him too much? Did I forget to build a life beyond motherhood? I did not search for blame, only understanding, because anger would only make the distance larger. Letter never sent. One evening, I wrote him a letter. I wrote slowly. I told him I was proud of him. I told him I understood his responsibilities. I did not mention my pain. I did not want him to carry it. I folded the letter and placed it in my bag. I never sent it. Some words are only meant to be written, not read. Small steps towards selfie started helping my sister in small ways. Cutting vegetables, watering. Plants. At first, it felt forced. Then, slowly, it felt calming. I realized I still had hands that could work, a heart that could care. I began taking short walks in the evening. The air felt different, lighter. The phone called one afternoon. My phone rang. My heart jumped. It was my son. His voice sounded tired. "How are you, Amy?" he asked. "I am fine," I replied honestly, because I was learning to be. There was a pause. Then he said, "The house feels quiet." I closed my eyes. "Yes," I said. "It always was." He did not speak for a moment. Then the call ended. That was all. Understanding without word sat. Short call told me many things. He was adjusting to learning his own lessons. I did not rush back. I did not ask to return. I let time do its work. Because some healing needs space. Forgiveness without apology. Learned something important during those days. Forgiveness does not always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with acceptance. I forgave my son, not because he was right, but because I loved him. And love does not keep count. Finding my own CNTR weeks passed, I felt steadier. I started praying for myself again, not just for others. I smiled more easily, not out of habit, but peace. I understood that my life did not end when my role changed. It only transformed. The Ion VTATON one evening. My son called again. This time his voice was softer. "Amy," he said, "would you like to come home for dinner sometime?" I held the phone gently. I did not rush to answer. "Yes," I said finally, "for dinner." Just dinner, not a return. A different VSIT when I went back. The house felt different, and so did I. I did not go as someone who belonged there. I went as a guest, and strangely, it made things easier. I ate quietly. I spoke kindly. No expectations, no. Hurt. End of part 4. Soft pause. I did not move back in. Not yet. I was learning something new. How to stand without leaning, and that lesson was preparing me for peace. Fade out, gentle piano. Warm evening light. I did not move back into the house right away, and no one asked me to at first. That truth felt heavy. Later, it felt honest. I continued living with my sister, but I visited my son's home from time to time. For tea, for dinner, for short moments that did not carry pressure. I learned to arrive without expectations and to leave before silence returned. A different kind of love. My son spoke to me differently. Now more careful, more respectful, not closer, but not careless either. I understood something important then. Love does not always come back in the same shape. Sometimes it returns quieter, less demanding, more distant, but still real. And I had to accept it as it was, not as it used to be. Watching from afar, I watched my son become a husband. I watched him struggle. I watched him grow. I did not guide him anymore. I prayed for him instead. That was my new role, and it took time to make peace with it. But once I did, my heart felt lighter. The day I was called Amy Agion one evening. As I was leaving after dinner, my daughter-in-law stopped me. She looked unsure. "Amy," she said softly, "please visit more often." It was the first time she called me that. Not out of duty, but choice. I smiled. And for the first time, it reached my eyes. Understanding, mine, did what words could not. It softened sharp edges. We were not the same family we once were, but we were. Learning how to be a new one, slowly, carefully with space for everyone. What? I learned that motherhood does not end, but it does change. I learned that children do not leave because they stop loving us. They leave because they must grow. And I learned that a woman's life cannot begin and end with one role, no matter how deeply she loves it. Choosing PACI today, I live with acceptance, not sadness. I smile when my son calls. I rest when he does not. I have learned to fill my days with small joys. Morning prayers, evening walks, quiet cups of tea. I no longer wait by the door. A quiet TRT is marriage. Did change everything between us, but it did not erase love. It simply asked me to love differently, with less holding, and more letting go. That was the hardest lesson of my life, and the most freeing one. Final reflection moral: if you are a mother listening to my story, know this. Your worth does not fade when your child chooses a new life. Your love does not become smaller when it steps back. Sometimes, the bravest thing a mother can do is learn how to stand gently on her own and still keep her heart open.